This video will show you how to replace the starter on a Ford Edge with a 3.5-liter engine. This will be mounted along the driver's side of your engine compartment. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Before removing anything involving the starter, we're making our way over to the negative battery terminal on our battery. We're going to disconnect the negative battery terminal end from the battery lead. I'm using a 10mm to loosen the mounting nut just enough that I can remove the terminal end. Now that I have that off of there, I'm going to rest it aside so it's making no contact in this area. We're moving along to removing the air filter housing. To remove the upper air filter housing, we're making our way to the mass airflow sensor. If you were looking underneath this area, you're going to find a small red locking tab. That red locking tab needs to be carefully pried rearward or outward. Once you have it dislodged, we can squeeze in on the secondary locking tab and pull this out of place. To do this, I'm just using a small flat blade screwdriver. You can use a small pick if necessary. I'm just going underneath the tab, pulling it away. With that pulled away, I'm squeezing on the secondary tab, and I'll just show you what all that looks like. There's our red tab. The next tab that I squeezed on is right here. A quick inspection for corrosion. Let's follow this wiring harness down to its mounting point. So down in the corner here, we're going to dislodge the wiring harness from our air filter housing. I'm using a small trim tool as a prying device. As you can tell, the plastic tab broke. That's common. If yours happens to break, we're just going to remove that, and you can use a wire tie for the installation. Now that I have that disconnected, I'm making my way towards where my two locking tabs are. This is holding the upper housing to the lower housing. We'll just carefully dislodge those. At this point, we can lift up on the corner of this. We're going to carefully start pulling it towards the engine, pulling it away from the lower housing on the driver's side. Now we're going to continue removing the upper air filter housing from the air inlet tube. There's a clamp right here. We're using an 8mm to loosen this. We're loosening the clamp just enough that we can remove the upper housing from the inlet tube. Let's set this aside. Let's remove the air filter. You want to give this a quick inspection. If it's dirty, replace it. After that, we can start removing the lower housing. As far as the lower housing, as you make your way towards the forward aspect of it, you're going to find a small metal bracket held in place with two 8mm headed bolts. Remove the pair and the bracket. To remove the lower housing, we're going to give it a wiggle. On the bottom of the housing, it has two locating tabs and those slide into rubber grommets. It may feel as though it's stuck in place. There we go. We can see those two locating tabs, and looking down, you can see the rubber grommets. Now that we've removed the air filter housing, I can see where the starter is located deep inside this area. Now what we need to do is dislodge our transmission shift cable from the transmission. Rather than removing the shift cable from the lever, let's just make our way down to where the lever connects to the transmission. A quick note about this, when you do remove this, we want to be careful not to shift the transmission into any other gear besides park, which is where it's at now. Otherwise, the vehicle may roll on you. Just a quick inspection of everything here. We should be able to set this aside. Let's continue on. Right behind here, this is where we can see where our starter wiring harnesses are. Looking at the starter wiring harness area, you're going to find you have a small red protective cover. We're going to remove that. It's a good idea to reuse it. As for the larger power wire, I'm using a 13mm for my mounting nut. We'll remove the wiring from it. Continue on to the smaller wire. For that, 10mm. Now that I've disconnected both wiring harnesses from the starter, we're going to continue on with the hardware holding the starter in place. As we make our way towards where the engine and transmission is, you're going to find that there is a wiring harness attached down in this area. We essentially just need to pry it up and out of place. Typically you can pull on this, or you could just use an angled pick if necessary. So I'm looking deep in this area. I'm just using an angled pick for this. I'm attempting to pull it up and out of place so we can gain access to the mounting hardware. There we are. So now that we have the wiring harnesses off of there, we're going to have a look in this area. Now you can carefully start moving this hose. We're just going to flex it out of position here. Now I'm going to hold this with a bungee cord so I can continue on. You can also use a strap. As I look inside this area, I can see where my wiring harness is still attached right up in this area. You can either pull this up and out of place, or you can use an angled pick, whatever's easiest for you. Now that exposes one piece of hardware here, and the second piece is just down in this area. We'll start along the back side here, 13 millimeter for both pieces of hardware. That's the rear piece of hardware. It does have the mounting stud up along the top here for our wiring harness. Just take note of that. Of course, we're going to clean this, give it a thorough inspection. If it's rotted, weak, or damaged, it has to be replaced. No stud on this mounting bolt. Let's take hold of the starter and remove it from the engine compartment. We're just gently twisting. If you find it stuck on the hose or the wiring harnesses, you need to carefully remove it, bringing it by each of these areas, being aware and not causing any damage. There it is, friend. Now, prior to installation of any brand new part, of course, we want to make sure we clean and inspect our mounting area. I'm just going to take hold of this coolant hose. We're looking inside this area. Now, as I look down towards where my transmission bell housing is, I can see the mounting point. We'll just use some fine sandpaper, give this a light scuffing. We want to make sure that there's a smooth mounting surface. All the way around this. Now, once we've cleaned that, we're looking inside this area real quick. There really isn't going to be too much to see. Just make sure there's no debris. Now, speaking of debris, typically you want to look along the top of the transmission as well. There's going to be a pocket. Let's go ahead and clean that out. After cleaning all that, let's also pay attention to the wires. Now, as far as the wires, we want to make sure we have a good contact point along each side. So I'm continuing on with my fine sandpaper. We'll just give it a light scuffing. Obviously, you can clean that as well as you deem fit. Remove any corrosion, confirm there's no damage. That's one wire. Let's do the same for the other. Now it's time to install the brand new starter. The first thing I always like to do is remove the hardware from along the area that our wiring harnesses would be. Let's make sure that we have everything out of the way. Make sure the wiring harnesses are in the proper placement. We can adjust those as necessary. Now, as I start sliding this in, let's make sure that we're properly aligned so we can install our mounting hardware. Now, as you start bringing this down, you may find that it wants to bind. That's because you have to come down at an angle. You can't just drop it down straight. Now, I have the starter in place. It's time for our two mounting bolts. As you remember during the removal process, the mounting bolt with the stud along the top was the rearward mounting bolt. We're going to start in both pieces of hardware. Snug them up. Torque each of them to 20 foot-pounds. Now I've got my torque wrench. Let's make sure we torque both of these. Same torque for the rear bolt. Now in the same area, we have our wiring harness that has to be secured on the rear stud. We have our plastic adapter. Line it up, press it on. Once you're sure that it's properly secured, we're paying attention to our electrical wiring harnesses next. I'm starting with the rearward wire since it's a little bit more difficult to gain access to, especially if we've already attached the forward wire. Once I have the wire slid into position, we're continuing on with our brand new locking washer and our brand new mounting nut. We do not need to reuse any of our original hardware. Here's my washer. Now the torque spec for this small mounting nut is 44 inch-pounds. It's not very much, and you're going to find there's minimal room to be able to gain access with a torque wrench. So I'm just using a small 10mm wrench. I'll make sure that this is bottomed out, and then I'm taking it only a tiny bit further. I do not want to cause any damage. Okay, right there is bottomed out. Just a tiny bit further there. Let's take hold of the wire. We're confirming that it's properly secured. It should not move around in any way. Continue on to your larger wire next. Now it's time for the larger power wire. Same process here. Just go ahead and slide it into position. Brand new locking washer, brand new mounting nut. We'll snug it up, and the torque for this will be 106 inch-pounds. I got my torque wrench. We'll make sure we protect the area. Now, if you were looking along the inboard side, you're going to find that you have two areas that have larger ports and one smaller port. Looking where it slides onto, you can tell that we have the larger diameter areas here and then the smaller diameter stud there. Let's go ahead and line this up, and we're pressing it in. Line it up. There we go. Double check, make sure that's secured in place. Now, after we have that cover in place, it's time for the transmission control shift lever. We're sliding this into position. You're going to find that it only fits in one way, so you can't mix it up. We have our mounting nut. Start it on. Once you have this bottomed out, you're going to torque it to 159 inch-pounds. When I go to torque this, I like to make sure that I put a bar up against the lever. I want to prevent this from turning while I torque this to that 159 inch-pounds. There we are. Now it's time for the lower air filter housing. Looking along the bottom, you remember that I told you there's two alignment tabs, and down along the body of the vehicle, you're going to have two rubber grommets. Line it up, press it in. It's going to feel along the bottom. Feels as though it's aligned. Press it in. Make sure it's secure. It's okay if it moves around, but it should not easily lift up and out of position. It's time for our forward bracket. The side closest to the air filter housing will have a nut serd on it. We're going to take this, we'll bring it into position. It's going underneath the housing and its small rubber grommet. We're going to carefully start in our mounting bolt here, being aware of any pinch points. Now we're not going to tighten it. Let's make our way to the forward mounting bolt. We'll get this installed as well. Once you have both of those started in, we can go ahead and snug them up. It's time for the air filter. We'll make sure we have it in the proper orientation so the filtering unit is facing down. Make sure there's no debris along this portion of the air filter, and we'll continue on with the upper housing. Now, as far as this upper housing, you remember there's 3 locating tabs, and on the lower housing there's going to be 3 ports for these to slide into. So we're coming in at an angle, then we'll roll it down, continue on with our 2 locking tabs on the other side. Now, as I press this down, we have our 2 locking tabs. Swing them up, listen for a click, double check to make sure each of them are secured as you continue on. After that, now that I have that locked in position, of course we do still have to secure the air inlet. Let's continue on to the mass airflow sensor next. We're going to take this and we're pressing it into position. Listen for a click here. Now after that click, we're pressing in our red locking tab. Another audible click, it does not move. Secure the wiring harness in the corner here. As you remember during the removal process, I had broken my plastic tab, and I mentioned that I can replace it with a wire tie. So that's just what I'm going to do. I'm going to come straight down through the hole, and of course we'll make sure it's secured. Let's get the air inlet onto the upper housing. We're lining it up, pressing it on as far as possible, and we're using an 8mm to tighten our clamp. Make sure that that's properly secured. You do not want any dirty or unmetered air making its way into the engine. Let's move along to reinstalling the negative battery terminal. We're pressing this on as far as possible, 10mm to tighten that mounting nut. Double check, make sure that's secured in place. Okay friend, we finished the installation of our vehicle starter. Now the next thing you want to do is hop in the passenger compartment. You're going to attempt to start the vehicle several times. After that, go ahead and close the hood and take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.